welcome or welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, my name is Jody, and on my channel, I talk about Broadway and books. And in today's video, I will be continuing my Broadway show series where I talk about every Broadway show I've ever seen. So normally in the series, I go over who was in the cast at my performance, who was on the creative team, how I liked the show, and anything interesting in the playbill. So without any further ado, let's get on to today's show. So today I'll be talking about the 29th Broadway show I ever saw, which was the Broadway musical, Dance of the Vampires. I saw this show in January 2003 at the Minskoff Theater, and if you didn't know, the Minskoff Theater is now the current home to the Broadway musical The Lion King. So now I'll get on into what is in the playbill. So here's the page that lists everyone involved in Dance of the Vampires on Broadway. And next up is the headshots of the lead and supporting performers. And then next up, I will show the page that has the headshots of the chorus, standbys, and understudies. So this is usually the point of the video where I go over who was in the cast and point out any performers' names who I recognize from having seen them in other Broadway shows since I saw them in Dance of the Vampires on Broadway. So I'll get to that now. Or I'll just point out performers' names who I recognize, who I got to see in a show for the first time. So Michael Crawford was in this show. I never saw him in a Broadway show before this or after this. This is the only time I ever got to see Michael Crawford in a show. If you love Broadway and you know about a lot of theater, you already know he opened on Broadway. He was the original Phantom in Phantom of the Opera, so he's very well known for that. Another performer, I don't know how to pronounce their last name, but I didn't remember they were in this show because I know them more for being on television. Renee, I don't know how to mispronounce the name, but he's right there. He was on Boston Legal. I didn't remember I saw him in the show. Okay, that's super cool to relearn. Yeah, Mandy Gonzalez was in this show. Max von Essen, Liz McCartney, Mark Price, Asa Summers, Robert Evans, which if you've been following the series on my channel, I got to see Robert Evans in Jekyll and Hyde. He played Jekyll and Hyde on Broadway when I saw it, and yeah, he was great in that show. Oh, and Asa Summers, he was in Next to Normal. That's one of my favorite Broadway shows ever. So, let's see who else I recognize. Ashley Amber Haas. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, she was in the musical The Wedding Singer on Broadway, and that's probably my favorite Broadway show of all time. But yeah, so anytime anyone's in that show, when I'm going over, all the shows I've seen, I will point that out because best show ever. Anyone else I recognize? Let's see. Oh, Sarah Schmidt. I believe she was in. I saw her in Fame in the off-Broadway. When I saw off-Broadway, I saw Fame off-Broadway in like 2003. I'll get to that eventually when I start my off-Broadway show series. But yeah, she was in Jersey Boys as well, I believe. And yeah, those are the names I recognize from having seen them in other Broadway shows since I saw them in Dance of the Vampires. Okay, so now I will get on to the creative team for this show. I guess before I get to the names I recognize from having seen them work on other shows, I guess somebody had just joined the the company as assistant stage manager. So it's kind of like an understudy slip, but for the creative team. Not understudy slip, but the show closed pretty much after I saw it, so they probably didn't have time to put it in the playbill, but I'll just share that. Yeah, I'll get now on into people that were on the creative team who I recognize from having seen them work on other Broadway shows since I saw Dance of the Vampires. Let's see. The only names I recognize really are John Carafa. I mispronounce names all the time, so apologies on that. But he did the choreography, and I believe he did the choreography for the 2002 Into the Woods revival that I saw Talked about that show recently on in the series. And then John Rando directed the show. And I guess I actually, this was my 29th Broadway show, but I was still very much learning, or picking up on who was a part of the productions when I was seeing them. But I guess I hadn't picked up on that because John Rando directed the Broadway musical The Wedding Singer, and I honestly did not remember he directed the show. I had no clue, but it makes sense. I'll get to that in a second that he would direct a show like this. Yeah, that's so cool. The Wedding Singer is by far one of my favorite Broadway shows ever, and John Rando directed that show, and so that's super cool to learn because I didn't know that. So I'll get now on into how I liked Dance of the Vampires. Okay, so I've come across this in this series now a few times now where I, remember I liked the show or I didn't like a show, but I don't remember much about the show. This is an unusual circumstance with this show because I don't even remember how I liked the show, like at all, which is really unusual for me. Usually I might like a show, but forget everything about the show, but at least I remember I like the show. I really have no recollection of how I like this show, like at all, which is super odd. But despite that, I remember the cast. Like I remember a lot of the cast members being in the show. I remember seeing Mandy Gonzalez in the show for the first time and Max von Essen in the show for the first time because I went on to see them in many Broadway shows after this. But as far as the show itself, I remember two things. There was a large staircase that at some point was on the whole entire stage. There were candles on it. It was very mysterious. And then I remember that they sang Total Eclipse of the Heart, that very well-known pop song. I looked in the playbill, and they only sang the song once, but for some reason, I remember them singing that song the whole entire show. Every other song, it felt like they were singing that. So maybe that was just me, or maybe that I just really remember that song and that moment. Yeah, I didn't remember a lot about the show. I did remember that it was considered a Broadway flop because it didn't last very long, and it was a very costly musical to make, and it lost basically all the money because it had such a short run on Broadway. And so because I didn't remember a lot about this show, I looked up to see when did the show close, how long did it actually run on Broadway. Apparently I was one of the few people who got to see this show because it only ran for 56 performances on Broadway. And when I looked at my ticket stub, I saw the date, and then I saw the date when I looked up more about the show to remember what it was about. I actually saw the show on the last day it was on Broadway, but I saw the Saturday matinee, and there were two shows on Saturday, so I didn't see the closing performance. But I did see the second to last performance, so that's kind of cool in itself to, not many people got to see this show, and I was one of them, so I guess that's cool in itself. But I think the problem with this show, from what I understand, is because when I was thinking back on this show, I couldn't remember if it was a serious show or a campy show. And apparently it was a bit of both, and that is a huge reason why it didn't really connect with audiences, because especially with a show like a vampire show, you kind of have to pick one or the other, serious or stupid, So I do remember if I have to I really don't remember fully how I felt about the show, but I think I might have been huh? Something like that. I mean, that's the most I can remember, but that makes sense because I the fact that I couldn't remember if it was campy or serious, it makes sense. I guess it was both, and maybe that's, I don't know where I'm going with this, but it kind of makes sense looking back on it now. If it was intended to be a campy musical, it makes sense that they would get a director like John Rando, because he went on to do several musicals that have that aesthetic. Like The Wedding Singer is very much a campy musical, and he also directed Urinetown, which I didn't remember until I looked in the playbill. But and that's very much like a campy musical as well. So that should have been if I knew more what I know now back then, that would have been oh, duh, that makes sense that they would get John Rando to direct this show because it's a campy musical. But I don't know. I don't remember much about it, honestly. Don't remember the story. Obviously included vampires of some kind, and it was very anticipated in many ways because it was like Michael Crawford's return to Broadway. And I don't know, despite not remembering a lot from the show, not really remembering completely how I like the show, um, it's cool in itself that I got to see one of the most well-known Broadway flops on Broadway, in a way. So that's cool in itself, and especially that I got to see it right before it closed. So not many people can say that, but I can say I saw this show when it was still on Broadway. I probably talked a little bit too long on that, but I don't know. I had stuff to say, so I said it. Now, I'll get on into anything interesting in the playbill, which I looked in the playbill beforehand, and there's not a lot of interesting stuff, at least for me. So I will just get on into showing, when I saw the show, January 2003. And then let's see. Maybe there's one thing, or I don't think this playbill had a lot of. It was about a lot of plays that. Oh, yeah, I didn't see many plays until years later, so a lot of articles about plays here, so I really have nothing to add, unfortunately. But they do have something in here about Michael Cavanaugh. He was in Moving Out. He sang all the songs and played the piano. If you're familiar with that show, there wasn't. That's how the show was performed. Like it's kind of like a band setup, but yeah, I remember seeing this. I saw this show. I don't remember if I saw him, but I guess when I get to this show in the series, I'll find out. I can't remember or not, but yeah, he was really great in the show. From what I saw, I can't remember if I saw him or not, but they performed on TV and stuff, so that's why I say it like that. I'll just get now to the next Broadway show I ever saw, which was my 30th Broadway show. I made it to number 30. Which was the Broadway revival of Man of La Mancha that starred Brian Stokes Mitchell. It's right there as listed in the playbill. And so yeah, thank you so very much for watching this video where I talked about my 29th Broadway show, which was the very well-known Broadway flop. I say that with love because I'm never putting down a show when I say Broadway flop. I say that with kindness because sometimes it happens, But thank you so very much for watching today's video where I talked about Dance of the Vampires. And be sure to stay tuned for my next show in the series, which will be my 30th Broadway show. Like I said, the Broadway revival of Man of La Mancha. So, as always, thank you so very much for watching. And until next time, bye.